Who wrote the book of Genesis anyway? I mean, here we got a Bible claiming to be written by God, and we say, well, we know men wrote the Bible. I mean, come on, God didn't write the Bible. And who wrote Genesis? Well, this is really a fascinating question. Who wrote that book of Genesis? The skeptics for years, like Dr. Pruitt, I've debated him 4 times now at University of West Florida. He's a Genesis scholar. He believes that 4 different authors wrote Genesis. This is what the Germans, higher critics, started teaching about 160 years ago. They said, well, if you read through Genesis, there are 4 different authors. You can tell by the style of writing. And they call it JEPD for Yahwist, Elohist, Priestly, and Deuterist. And they're actually partially correct. There are different styles of writing in Genesis. If you look at Genesis chapter 1, God created the heaven and the earth. God said, God saw, God divided, God said, God called. 31 times it uses the word God. When you go to chapter 2, starting with verse 4, there's a change. It says, Lord God, Lord God, Lord God, Lord God, all through chapter 2. It's using a different name for God, a totally different style of writing. People that study Hebrew say, wow, it's a new person's writing this. Correct. So who wrote Genesis anyway? Well, the book of Mark chapter 12 tells us, in the book of Moses, it talks about, how God said to Abraham certain things. That's obviously referring to Exodus. So here, the New Testament's telling us that Moses wrote Exodus. In Deuteronomy, it says if a man dies, has no children, the brother marries the wife, and the first child gets the inheritance of the dead father to make sure property doesn't get scrambled up. That was the law they had, okay? Well, if you read in Luke, Moses wrote, raise up seed to your brother. So here Luke is telling us pretty obviously that Moses wrote Deuteronomy. With a little searching through Scriptures, you could prove conclusively that Moses wrote Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. No question. It never mentions Moses as the author of Genesis. So who wrote Genesis? Actually, Moses was the editor of Genesis. He collected it. But there were 10 different eyewitness accounts in Genesis. Adam actually wrote part of Genesis. The way to tell where it breaks off, 10 different times in the book of Genesis, you will find the phrase, these are the generations of. That's the switching phrase where a new author now is taking over. Apparently, God wrote the first chapter. There's no way anybody else would have known those things. But chapter 2, Adam was there for chapter 2. And Adam wrote chapter 2, 3, 4. Chapter 5, he switches off. Now keep in mind, Moses edited Genesis from 10 eyewitness accounts. He probably had the written on clay tablets, we would assume, preserved as a pottery record forever. You write on the clay, bake it in the sun, and it lasts a lot longer than a book lasts. And Noah would have taken some of these on the ark with him, the first few chapters, get a little box of clay tablets and carry it on the ark. The fact that other people wrote down their account before Moses got around to doing it does not mean they got it right. And the skeptics will say, well, the Sumerian legend was written before Moses even lived. That's correct. And they'll say, see, that proves Moses was copying from them. No. If you got 10 people or 20 people that witness an event, and they all go home and they're going to write their story about what they saw, the first one to publish his story does not necessarily have it right. The fact that somebody published first doesn't mean they got it right. Genesis 5 says the generations of Adam. Adam right there is signing off. Probably, again, clay tablets makes a permanent record, lasts for millennia. Chapter 6 is these are the generations of Noah. Noah is signing off right there. He wrote actually chapter 5 and part of chapter 6. In chapter 10, verse 1, these are the generations of the sons of Noah. Noah's sons wrote part. They wrote some more. And then Shem wrote some more after that. Shem apparently was interested in keeping track of where all the grandkids are leaving to. And the Genesis chapter 10 is called the Table of Nations, and it goes through 75 different original nationalities. And he kept track of all of them. Oh yeah, my Uncle Herman had 3 kids, and these are his kids, and there's where they went. I mean, my oldest brother, is very interested in family trees. He went over to Norway to study the Hovind family tree, And you find all kinds of people hanging from their neck in a family tree. But some people are just interested in genealogies, all right? I know people that spend their lifetime trying to chase back, like the movie Roots, where did my ancestors come from? Well, apparently, Shem was the guy of the 3 sons who was interested, or God led him to do it, whatever. But he kept the records. And Genesis 10 is called the Table of Nations. It's kind of boring to read, but it just tells all the sons and what happened to them. Okay? Chapter 11. These are the generations of Terah. Chapter 25. These are the generations of Ishmael. These are the generations of Isaac. Generations of Esau. When you read through chapter 35 of Genesis, you read it and say, what is this doing in here? It's all the dukes of Edom and the dukes of Hazard and all these dukes in here, What's all these dukes doing in here in chapter 36? Chapter 35, chapter 36. Well, the guy who wrote that chapter was interested in that. And God wanted it preserved in His Word, but it's very interesting. No dates are given for these guys and how old they were when their sons were born. The only ones that get the dates mentioned of how old they were when their son was born are those in direct line to genealogy of Jesus Christ. Nobody else matters, apparently. Okay? It's true they were there and they were, good people, loved the Lord, but they don't matter. Jacob wrote part of it. 10 times in Genesis you see the phrase, these are the generations of. There's a great footnote in Henry Morris's Defender's Bible. But we sell the Defender's Bible. We mentioned that earlier. I got a disclaimer. I disagree with some things, but it's really good. In his article about the Teledoth, it's called Teledoth, is fascinating, about 10 different authors of Genesis. So the skeptics are partly right. There are different authors. And it's always wise to listen to your skeptics, you know. If somebody comes up and says, you got bad breath, well, they might be right, okay? Now, if they say, you know, you're wrong about the Bible, well, then they're wrong, okay? But Genesis, 10 different authors, fascinating story, all of them eyewitnesses, which makes it even better. Of course, God could have written it yesterday and gotten it right, okay? He could inspire somebody tomorrow to write it and get it perfectly correct, not a problem. He can preserve His Word. But the fact that it was done through 10 different eyewitnesses, to me, kind of adds even more credibility.